Right, let's call this to order. This is the Wednesday, December 19th, 2018 Christmas edition of the Concord City Planning Board. This meeting's been called to order. If we could call it.
Bill didn't come up.
Would you like to speak the members?
Let's,
First?
you know what, we should do that. So we'll seat new member Earl Pierce as being as a full-time planning board member. So welcome to the board, Earl. We'll call the roll. We'll seat, Kira Dalcino and Frank Kennison. Seat Kira for Suzanne. Seat Frank for John Regan. Will give us a
Sure.
that'll give us a quorum. If we could call the roll.
Sure. Chairman Woodfin?
Here.
Vice Chair Foss? Councilor Champlin?
Here.
Member Berger?
Here.
Member Hicks? Member Pierce?
Here.
Member Gunn?
Here.
And Member Dolcino? Here.
Okay, we will proceed to item 3, which is approval of the minutes from the November 20th, 2018 minutes. Anybody have any questions, concerns regarding those? If not, we'll take a motion to approve those as submitted. Motion's been made
Second.
and second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. On the number 4 for agenda overview, we have no items pulled from the agenda. I'm sorry, we do items. I want to do this 8 to 12 right now.
Correct.
So on our agenda items under item 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12, we're going to table those items officially. If someone make a motion to table those items, 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12.
So moved.
Second.
Action's been made and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Anybody here for 8, 9, 10, 11, or 12? The back end of our agenda, those items have been tabled until further notice. Will there be renotice or no?
Yes.
Yes.
So renotice will come on any of those items that are on the, so no items have been pulled from the agenda. There is on our agenda, item 13, which is a solar amendment that we're going to talk in pretty good about at the end of the meeting. So those of you shopping through the end of your agenda and looking at the end of the agenda, just be prepared for item 13. We're going to have a little bit of discussion regarding that. There'll be no public comment taken at that point. Anybody's welcome today, but we're only going to be talking about it amongst ourselves and not accepting any public testimony. So with all that, we've got item 5, which is design revocations by consent. No items have been pulled by the board. If any member of the audience has an issue with item 5A, 5B, or 5C, if you could make it known, if you'd like to speak in opposition of any of those items. If not, we'll accept, we'll put those all through the consent item and push those through in one vote. So seeing none, if someone would like to make a motion to approve item 5A, 5B, and 5C as submitted under consent.
So moved.
Second.
That motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. We'll move on quickly to item 6, public hearing section. If we could read item 6A into the agenda.
TF Bernier, on behalf of Dills Family Revocable Trust of 2016, requests minor subdivision approval for a 2-lot subdivision at 224 Little Road in the residential open space district. Staff does recommend that application be determined complete.
Okay, so there's a determination of completeness component. It's recommended the application be determined complete. Someone likes a motion to determine that application complete?
So moved. Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. We'll open the public hearing and welcome you to the table. Sir, if you could state your name for the record.
Good evening, me, Tim Bernier, TF Bernier Incorporated, the Delphos Family Trust on the subdivision. Peter is here as well if you have any questions for him. It's, trying to get this to be full screen for you, but a little bit. Essentially, it's a one-lot subdividing house off the parent track. It's 14.2. Total track is 14.28. Has a little over 800 feet of frontage on Little Pond Road. Is quite a bit of frontage here. The house is right in the middle, so the smaller of the two lots ends up with the bulk of the frontage just because of the shape. This is Fisk Road down here in Coventry, located right in there. Essentially, the Delphos family would like to subdivide off the house and keep the 10 acres of land. And this application is pretty straightforward. Submitted a request for one waiver that's not in your packet. We didn't get it to Beth in time. For the overhead utilities to the existing house, obviously the new lot will have underground utilities, but the existing overhead line is quite long, goes through goes over some old foundation stuff that really create a lot of character for the lot. And we'd like to preserve those as overhead. Also, it's a pretty significant cost with only one lot subdivided. It'd be cost prohibitive to put those underground. So, if we could, maybe I can. There's an option. Yeah, so that is the only waiver request, is to keep the overhead utilities with the existing home. The state subdivision application has been submitted, but we haven't received it back yet, but it's pretty straightforward. Those are 4.2 and 10.1 acres, more or less, so pretty good sized lots. Lot A is almost 645 feet of frontage, so a lot of frontage. This is in the watershed district. Pennacook Lake is down over. This is part of the Pennacook Lake parcel. It's quite a ways down the hill, but that's where it is. So the minimum lot size here is 4 acres because of the watershed district.
Okay. I'm sorry, Beth would have asked you if there's any comments or questions regarding, any staff overview on this particular. So can you give us an update on the waiver request?
Sure. Yeah, this was something we both missed. Staff supports the waiver request. An older home, it would be cost prohibitive to require. There's no development at all proposed currently. They're developing subdividing the other part for future development, but since there's no construction occurring as this minor subdivision, we agree that it would be an undue hardship. So we support that, and we already had in the staff report a note to the plan that any future development bury the lines, and that would hold if they ever demoed the existing house, that they were required to bury the lines at that time.
Okay. Okay. Any member of the board questions for this applicant? Nope. Any member of the audience wish to address this application? Nope. Okay. So we've got before us item 3.1, granting minor subdivision approval to the two-lot subdivision at 224 Little Pond Road, subject to the following precedent and conditions noted below.
Can I
Beth, where
interrupt?
would you like to put the waiver?
So I would do the waiver as 3. And then change the grant minor subdivision as 3.2.
Okay.
And read 3.2.
So as noted, we'll make a change here to our numbering. So 3.1 be to grant the waiver.
Yep.
And why don't we do that one first?
Yep, so we grant the waiver to section 26.02 of the subdivision regulations to not bury the utility of the existing building utilizing the criteria from RSA 674:36, section 2N2.
Okay, so would someone like to make a motion to grant, to approve the waiver recommendation? That motion's been seconded, correct? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. We'll take 3.2, newly numbered 3.2, which is grant minor subdivision approval for the two-lot subdivision at 224 Little Pond Road, subject to the following precedent and subsequent conditions outlined as precedent condition A, 1 through 6.
1 through 7.
7, and B, subsequent conditions, number 1. If someone would like to make a motion to grant that as outlined.
Second.
Motion's been made and roundly seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries, and that is that. We're done with that one. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Hi, Peter.
Friendly group, huh?
I'll go see if I can.
Okay, that brings us to item 6B on our agenda. If we could read that into the record.
Richard E. Bartlett and Associates LLC, on behalf of DW Crest Street Properties LLC, request minor subdivision and comprehensive development plan approval for a 2-unit condominium conversion at 4 Crescent Street in the Opportunity Performance District.
Okay, do we have a completeness component on this project as well?
Staff recommends it be determined complete and the public hearing open.
Okay, so the determination of completeness component it holds as well. So if someone would like to motion to, the application complete and open the public hearing.
I move that we deem the application complete and open the public hearing.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries, so we will open the public hearing. A staff update?
Really straightforward condo subdivision. There's no waivers requested. There is a comprehensive development plan component, and it's just because it's in a performance district, not an intense development at all. They're not changing anything, properties, so.
So no new development, no
No new
new builds,
development.
just new condo lines.
Right, yep.
Okay. All right, welcome to the take. State your name for the record.
Thank you very much. My name is Mark Sargent. I'm with Bartlett and Associates, and I am here to representing DEW Crescent Street Properties. The subject property is located at 4 Crescent Street, Pennacook. It's bordered on the south by Canal Street and on the north by the Connecticut Bosquen Town Line. Has an area of 2.11 acres, and it currently has an existing 14,510 square foot commercial building located on it, and also a 64-space paved parking lot. Said parking lot has access to both Crescent Street and Canal Street. We're before the board this evening to create a 2-unit commercial condo. Unit 1, which faces Canal Street, Unit 1 is this here, has 10,000.
I'm sorry, Mark, where was Unit 1?
Unit 1 is, yeah,
Big
this
rectangle
area
is
here,
Unit 1.
see kind of where the line is, right?
Yeah.
Unit 1 runs up through there, runs
Okay.
down. It's the big one. Right now, I think it's called Family Funds of Pennacook.
Okay.
The building is, or the unit is 10,268 square feet. Unit 2, located up here, faces towards Crescent Street, currently a vacant unit, 4,242 square feet. There is no proposed limited areas. Here, everything beyond the units themselves will be common areas. And, essentially, that's it. If you had any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Is this a single-story building?
Single story.
Single story. Okay. Any questions of the board of this applicant? Any member of the audience wish to address this application? Nope, seeing none, we'll close the public hearing and get to my screen here. Before us tonight, waivers on this, Beth?
No waivers.
Okay, so in 4.1, we've got 4.1 is to grant comprehensive plan approval. Do we need to do that?
Yes.
Okay, so 4.1 to grant comprehensive development plan approval for the conversion of an existing commercial building into 2 units with common areas at 4 Crescent Street on the OCP district. Would someone like to make a motion to grant that comprehensive development plan approval?
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made, seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. 4.2 is to grant the minor subdivision approval for the condominium approval conversion at 4 Crescent Street, subject to the following precedent conditions to be fulfilled in 1 year, and that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Someone like to make a motion to grant that minor subdivision approval as outlined?
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made, seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And carries, and that is it. You're all
Great.
set.
Thank
you
you.
very much.
And everybody have a Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. You too. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
It's in January, I'm sure. All right, let's read item 16 to the agenda if we could.
Interchange Development and Bradley, Whitney, and Jennifer Habel request minor subdivision and comprehensive development plan approval for line adjustment at 1 Whitney Road in the Gateway Performance District. Staff does recommend the application be complete and the public hearing open.
Okay, so we've got a determination of completeness again. We're on a roll with those tonight. We've got a determination of completeness. Someone like to make a motion to
So moved.
find the application complete and open the public hearing. Motion's been made and all those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. We'll open the public hearing, get a quick staff update. Yes?
Sorry, we missed it.
Carol?
No? Yeah, Carol.
Do I need to
Frank.
recuse? Right. Frank, motion, and the second was
Carol.
Carol. Thank you.
You recuse?
I guess so.
Why?
Why?
Oh, you do? Do you need to recuse on this Whitney Road?
I live next door to Jen, so I don't,
Unless you have
Are
any
you in a
financial-
butter to this property?
no.
No, you don't have any financial stake in this property, do you? You can stay. You can stay.
Very honest.
We admire you.
I was pointing at you because I thought you sent you the application.
Yeah,
so.
thank you.
Okay, could we get a quick staff update if we could?
Sure, this is just, it's a lot line adjustment for the existing, between the two where the Dunkin' Donuts gas station is and the adjacent vacant lot. But because it's in the performance district, this also requires a comprehensive development plan. I think staff and the Rossios recognize that it's a little premature in the development phase of this property to grant complete comprehensive development approval. So we have placed conditions on the CDP so they can move forward with their lot line adjustment. We didn't want to hold that up. So those conditions will be the resolution of the intersection of Whitney Road and Hoyt Road, and then continue to work with Plain Engineering to address some site circulation concerns that are shown in the CDP plan that was presented.
The plan prepared by Webb Stout of FWF Land Surveying, and due to a conflict, he couldn't be here tonight. The property is located off of I-93 at exit 17, and the site is bounded by Hoyt Road to the north, Whitney Road to the west. We have the Wheelabrator Concord facility to the south, and then we have the railroad and then the highway further to the east. It's a 43-acre site, and as Beth mentioned, it's currently improved with a gas station convenience store at the corner of Route 4 and Whitney Road. The rest of the site is vacant. The proposal is a lot line adjustment between two properties, tax map 6P Lot 5, which is owned by Interchange Development, which I'm going to highlight the boundary of it here. It's just under 10 acres. It's a rectangle. The rest of the lot is currently owned by Bradley Whitney and Jennifer Habel. So that's the rest of the 43-acre lot, so approximately 33 acres on the remainder. The lot line adjustment proposal is to annex 9.76 acres from Lot 6 to Lot 5. So it's this line right here. We're kind of extending it further to the east. Lot 5 will increase from 9.08 acres to 19.5 acres, and Lot 6 will decrease from 33.2 acres to 23.47 acres. Lot 5 has 422 feet of frontage on Whitney Road, and Lot 6 has 361 feet of frontage, where 300 feet is required. There's no change to the frontage of either lot in the proposal. The property, as mentioned before, is in the Gateway Performance District. Part of it is also in the Industrial District. That's this area down here. So a CDP is required, and I guess I'm going to learn how to do this. Pull up the CDP plan that we were just talking about. And as mentioned, this, oh, I can't.
Very adept, Laurie, very adept.
I know.
I'm
you
trying.
win.
I don't want to scare anybody. Again, this is where it is at the moment. Let's put it that way. We did come in for one meeting with staff to talk about the layout. We made some adjustments since then. Trying to get the buildings fairly close together, trying to get the layout to still provide access. Particularly, we have an issue with providing access to the industrial portion. We don't want trucks to get to the industrial portion by going through the retail portions and areas where we might have pedestrians. So trying to keep those two separate, but yet have all the buildings together is a little bit of a challenge. So this plan is very similar to what you saw when we were doing the rezoning request. Again, we've fleshed it out a little bit further. And what this plan also shows is that if you notice the purple line here, that's the lot line that we're incorporating with this lot line adjustment, that the two could still stay separate lots, in that the lots that will remain with Mr. Whitney and Ms. Habel, they would own the piece that goes to the industrial and could be placed on that portion somewhat separate of the other portion. But the intent eventually is to merge the lots and do a full subdivision, condominium subdivision with the entire lot. So that'll happen sometime later. So for now, this is the step we're taking. I'm going to call it a baby step towards the eventual development of the entire property. Again, it just has the same uses on it, the supermarket, the retail facilities, service uses, and the industrial building. We are requesting a waiver to not provide topography for the entirety of Lot 6. The second, let me get to the second sheet here. So the topography shown is in the bulk of the lot, but the backside in the ravine, that needs to be surveyed and put on the future plan, so that'll get done. We are in agreement with all the staff comments and the proposed conditions, and in fact, Webb was able to make all of the changes that you requested, but I didn't get them to you before tonight, so those are all done, and I'll be glad to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay, questions of this applicant from anybody at the board? Any member of the audience have a question for this application? Quiet group. Okay, any follow-up from staff, any comments?
Nope, I think I forgot to mention the waiver, but yeah, we're supportive of the waiver.
Okay, so there is a, can we just hit the waiver real quick?
It's under 4.2,
4.2.
after the CDP. You have to approve the CDP before you can move
Okay.
on the
right.
subdivision.
Okay, so no questions from the board regarding the application before us, so we'll look at,
May I make a comment?
yes, sir.
I was just going to say, it's good to see you moving forward with
Oh,
this.
thank you very much. Thank you. It's been
Thank
slow,
you.
but
Yeah.
we're moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Okay, Your Honor. Wow.
Mr. Chairman.
Stepping up in the world. Yeah, you took it, I can't take it back. Okay, so, under recommendations under 4.1 is to grant the comprehensive development plan. Is that our first one? So grant the comprehensive development plan. And again, conceptually, very, nothing in stone here. For the proposed lot line adjustment associated with the commercial and industrial development at 1 Whitney Road in the GWP district, subject to the following conditions, 1, 2, and 3, as outlined. Would someone like to make a motion to grant that comprehensive development plan approval in 4.1?
So moved.
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 4.2 is to grant the request for rate waiver to section 12.083 to not provide topography for the entirety of Lot 6. Would someone like to make a motion to grant that waiver as outlined?
So moved.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. And 4.3 is to grant minor subdivision approval for the lot line adjustment at 1 Whitney Road, subject to the following precedent conditions and fulfilled within 1 year. That is under precedent conditions 1 through 7. That's it, 1 through 7. So someone like to make a motion to grant that minor subdivision approval as outlined?
Second.
Motion's been made, right? Yes, somebody made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries, and you are good to go. Thank you very much. Okay. That was 6C, so let's go to 6D.
TF Moran, on behalf of Capital Hotel Company, VI LLC, requesting minor subdivision approval for a 2-unit condominium at 406 South Main Street in the General Commercial District.
Capital Hotel Company 6 LLC, is that right? Is it VI or 6?
I wasn't sure.
Is 5 others?
Right?
I guess so. Let's get a staff update if we could while he's setting up.
Sure. So as Heather mentioned, this is a 2-lot condo subdivision. The applicant has requested waivers after the publishing of this report for the agenda. Those waivers were indicated in section 3 of this report. In addition, they have requested a waiver not to provide a location plan. So the additional waivers are 12.08 subsection 3 for topography, 12.08 subsection 4 for soils, 15.03 subsection 13 for the location of municipal water
14.
infrastructure.
14, right?
14, yes. And 15.03 subsection 15 for the location of non-municipal utility infrastructure. All of these details are provided on the concurrent site plan, so staff does support these waivers.
Okay. So determination of completeness on this as well? So there is a determination of completeness component, and staff does find the application complete?
Yes.
Recommends opening the public hearing? Look at me, huh? Okay, so we've got a determination of completeness component. Someone like to make a motion to define the application complete and open the public hearing? That motion's been made
Second.
and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries, so we will open the public hearing. Welcome to the table. If you could state your name for the
All
record.
right, good evening. My name is Nicholas Skolin. I'm a licensed engineer and senior project manager with TF Moran. Steve Dupree was supposed to be with me tonight. He should be on his way. He has a little bit of a family item he needs before he can be here. So
He's been watching on TV, and he didn't know we'd go this fast.
Yeah, you guys are cruising along. I'll give you some credit. Relative to what we're here for, this is part of a larger development project. This is 406 South Main Street, tax map 1, block 2, lot 3, comprised of approximately 2.4 acres. This is zoned general commercial district. What they're proposing here is a 2-unit condo site plan. I'll indicate the units, one of which being for the proposed hotel, the second of which, the second condo unit located here, which would be for a future restaurant pad. I'll get into more of the details of the site layout as we talk about the actual site plan, but the intent here is this is a redevelopment project. The somewhat vintage Days Inn, sitting on top of the hillside there at exit 12, will be demolished and make way for a new hotel. So I'll keep it fairly simple. We went over the waiver requests, just relative, if there are any comments to this portion of the project, and then we'll make sure we speak to the project at large as part of the site plan approval.
Okay, so yeah, so you've got 2 items on the agenda, right? So 6D is yours and 6E is yours as well? Okay, so before us now, so nothing else on that. So we do have a public hearing component, so this is for the approval of the 2-unit condominium. Any questions from the board members on the 2-unit condominium component of this application? Any member of the audience wish to address that portion of our application tonight? Nope. So we will close the public hearing on this, and any other staff updates? No other staff updates. A lot of technical review comments, so we're all,
The applicant did submit revised plans
Okay.
quite quickly to their comment, and they addressed all of the staff comments
Okay, so-
on this application.
you're good with all the review comments made?
Yes.
Okay. So we'll move right over to the waivers. Staff does support the recommendation that the waivers be approved under 3.1, 1208 subsection 3, 1208 subsection 4, 1503 subsection 14, and 1503 subsection 15. If someone would like to make a motion to grant those waivers as so eloquently outlined.
So moved.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. We'll move on to 4.1, which is to grant the minor subdivision approval for the creation of 2 condominium units at 406 South Main Street, subject to the following precedent conditions and fulfilled within 1 year. Precedent conditions 1 through 7. Someone like to make a motion to grant minor subdivision approval as outlined?
So moved.
Second.
Motion has been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. So let's move on to item 6E, if we could read that into the record.
Sure.
You can stay right there.
TF Moran, on behalf of Capital Hotel Company 6 LLC, requesting major site plan approval for the redevelopment of 406 South Main Street to construct a 4-story, 82-room hotel with associated access, parking, drainage, and utility improvements in the general commercial district. Staff does recommend that the application be determined complete. I'll just add on to that, and I'll defer to staff to give an update
Yeah, let's-
about the waiver.
I was going to say, let's do the determination of completeness, and then we'll move into the waiver. I do want to get some updates on that. So we've got a determination of completeness component. Would someone like to make a motion to find this application complete?
I
Open the
move
public
we find
hearing.
the application complete. Second.
And motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. So the determination of completeness is done. We've opened the public hearing, and...
No, we're not
No,
opening
not opening, not open the public hearing, sorry. We've found the application complete.
Maybe.
And we will take a quick staff update if we could on this. So
Sure. So the applicant has requested a waiver to section 6.03, subsection 2, subsection C, to hold the public hearing in the same meeting as the determination of completeness. Originally, staff did not support this waiver due to the need for an ADA accessible walkway to be provided from the sidewalk along South Main Street to the entrance of the building. Again, just as the applicant provided updated plans, revised plans for the minor subdivision, they have done so for the major site plan as well and have provided a ADA accessible walkway to the front of the building. Noting that, staff does have concerns about the precedent this sets for doing major site plans in one meeting. However, because the applicant has addressed our primary concern, staff would just defer to the board to vote on whether or not to grant the waiver.
Okay, so I am hesitant on anything to set a precedent, and I don't like setting precedents unless there's a good reason to do it. And I'm wondering, again, since we're not in public session here, Heather, you can help me out on this, but if I could ask the public if there's anybody here that has issues, concerns about this application. I'm concerned that we're
Interesting question.
that we're opening ourselves up to say, do the determination of completeness, do the notice,
Yeah.
and do everything in one meeting, and the public doesn't have a chance to notice. Now, this has been in the paper, so there's been a little bit of.
It has been
There's been a
noticed.
little bit exposure. It's been noticed, I'm sorry. It's been formally noticed, but usually we'll do the determination of completeness. It'll turn the cycle, and we would have heard this in January. So now we're hearing it in December.
I should add that we did move this application forward to go before ADR, before they were determined complete, which is not the norm.
Right.
We've also received revised plans that have addressed all of engineering and planning's review comments as
Right.
well.
So my concern is that this project in particular, I don't think there's going to be a lot of opposition, but I don't want to assume that. If this was in a downtown developed area, in a close-knit neighborhood, or some other neighborhood, we're setting precedent that maybe next time down the road, somebody who comes in with a plan that's in a developed area that wants to push it through quickly, we don't have that same latitude to push it back. And again, I think if we look at it and say the application's really been, looked at from engineering's perspective and from staff's perspective, the issues have been abated. We open it up and ask anybody in the audience if there's any questions, and then kind of move from there. But I don't know if that's legal. I don't know if we can do that or not. Can you?
I think you should talk to the board members about,
Okay.
to see what the consensus is. I mean, we told you our concerns,
Yeah.
and I think you make very good points. There is a 30-day appeal period, which I guess is a good time to announce. If any member of the public has a problem with the application, they can ask, for.
For an appeal process to take place.
Correct. But I think you should, my opinion would be I'm curious what the board members think, if they
Good question.
are comfortable with the precedent, or if, or how they feel about proceeding.
Just like to ask, what is the purpose of having to, other than the obvious of wanting to get started, what's the rush?
I think that's the obvious, is get started. I think it's get it going, and
I'll expand on it whenever you guys are ready.
Yeah, we'll take that in just a minute, but I'll say on my piece of it, I think the applicant wants to get the process started and, get it rolling. So that would be the issue more than anything. Kira?
What did the notice say exactly? Did it say that it was public hearing for completeness, or what?
So when we post our legal notices, we typically, we're required through the statute, through the RSAs, to notice even when there's a determination of completeness, when an application has been received. So our public notices have all minor and major site plans on it. Typically, there's language in bold that we put at the bottom that says no public comment will be taken for any of the major site plan or subdivision applications on this agenda. And we're trying to alert the public that it will be the next meeting that will occur. And a lot of people in the development community are aware that it will be the next meeting that you're able to make comment on it. On this particular legal notice, we removed that language, understanding that this waiver may be granted and the board may allow them to do it all in one meeting. So that language was removed. So, technically, this meeting has been noticed, as legally required. Are people going to get that? Who knows? So, does that answer your question?
I saw another hand. Teresa?
What's the appeal process?
We'll pull forward a little bit.
Excuse me. What exactly is the 30-day appeal process? Who are they appealing to, and what's
board.
involved? So they're
They
appealing.
submit an appeal request to the board based on whatever their logic or reasoning is, and then you determine how you're going to proceed with that.
So we determine if we're going to accept the appeal?
Right.
Okay.
So again,
Or vote on it. They
If
have
it's-
a right to request to come and
So we could basically take that appeal or tell people that they have the right to appeal it in 30 days if there are questions regarding this application, and then we would hear it in January, right?
And then, in lieu of what happened a few months ago.
Right.
And then, if we voted on this, I mean, the legal part is what I'm not understanding here. If we voted to approve this and somebody appeals, and is it there that kicker that if they start something, then actually, is the appeal a moot process, or is it a legitimate appeal? Can we then reverse our decision? Is the question.
Good question. I don't know.
We haven't been presented, I don't know what the burden is to demonstrate that. So I think that's a good question. Have any of you experienced that in a public meeting before?
Well, I just
don't think
know a few months ago, when I asked to
Correct.
reconsider, I was told not to ask, and basically that once we'd made the decision,
Correct.
that if we reconsidered, then there'd be legal action, et
But that's at
cetera.
the board level. So this would be a
Right.
public appeal. Somebody in the audience wants to appeal it that's not here.
Right.
So it's similar-
No, but
I'm-
that's not my question. My question is, if we approve it, just like we approved the one
Yeah, yeah.
before, if we approve it
gotcha.
and the process goes forward and somebody waits 30 days, they come to our next meeting and they appeal, do we then have the right, if we somehow or another move by what they say, to deny the approval that we made tonight?
I think you would have to determine whether there was, sufficient information to do something like
Okay,
that.
that's not my question. If we determine there is
Yes,
sufficient
I think then
information,
yes.
are we sure?
Not having had it come before us before, that's the best
I
that I
don't
can.
know. I'm not sure.
I think there's a legal question. Which card?
It seems to me, given this appeal process, that if we were to approve it tonight, there's still this
It's a
pending
catch-all if you had to. Yeah.
uncertainty on the part of the applicant. So I'm not sure that it would really gain them anything to
Well,
have us.
it's true for every single application that's
that you have.
approved. Every single approval, if there's an abutter or somebody who's, can demonstrate that they have standing in an application, for every single approval, someone can submit an appeal. Legally, that's a right that people, even for design review approval.
That may
But,
be the
but
case,
again, they
but-
would have to demonstrate that they have sufficient
Right, and it's.
burden to prove that.
It just seems that in most cases, the process has been normal, shall we say,
Right.
whereas in this case, it seems like by essentially shortcutting the normal process, we might be opening things up for greater odds for an appeal. Just, I'm uncomfortable.
I have some trepidation. I am sensing some trepidation. So,
And I will-
process, yeah, go ahead.
I will say
Process-wise?
that staff has recommended approval of that waiver in the past. Usually it's for smaller projects. That's, I think, our only hesitation in just saying, yeah, go ahead and do it, because it's usually when we recommend approval, it's not for like such big projects.
So there's precedent in the sense that we've done it before, but
Correct.
it's not been for a major site plan like this.
Correct.
So it sounds like circumstances make a difference in the precedent setting, or the not following the precedent.
Or our willingness to.
Right, so you've already removed some of the notice that you typically put in, talk about previous approvals of waivers for different types of projects. So if somebody came forward with a project downtown, like Rich was concerned about, you say, well, this project downtown, we needed to wait on this one because there are so many butters.
Right.
So this could be of a different flavor type
Right.
of project.
Well, given that there's one abutter and a state highway at that point, I mean, there's only one abutter at this project. That's a good point. So, I mean, at that point, then we're looking at it with a different eye. I mean, and I'm fine to do that. I just want to look at it the right way. Byron?
Yeah, Matt kind of articulated what was on my mind, which is that this is a very prominent site. On the other hand, it only has one abutter. I mean, on the other side, this is a very avant-garde design. I mean, compared to other things that we've had go up in Concord, I'm not averse to the design. It's quite possible that because of its nature, it might attract more attention despite the fact that there's only one abutter. But the fact that there is only one abutter in this case, and the fact that I think we've articulated our intent to be very cautious about repeating this precedent on major projects that are in the downtown area or areas with a number of abutters, which is what I'm hearing, then I would be disposed to move forward with the application.
So why don't we take that in the sense of a question to the board? I'd like to do a motion, and I'd like to vote on it right? Yes. So that's under the waiver piece of it, right?
Correct.
So under 2.1, the applicant requests a waiver from section 1603 subsection 11 to allow the applicant to provide the signage to a separate submittal for a later date. The applicant has retained a signage vendor. What? That's not right.
Right.
2.1.
It's under the very beginning of the letter, it's not under the recommendations, because you have to do that first.
It's under the determination of completeness section.
Yes.
At the very
Where is it?
Page 1.
Page 1.
Wow.
Because
We'll get to signage in a minute, so. Okay, so under where it says staff does not support this waiver?
Correct.
Great, due to the fact that, right, okay. So we need,
Again, just to point out, those issues were addressed.
those
that it
issues were
states
addressed,
in the-
and
That was my understanding.
and everything's been addressed to staff's satisfaction. So we don't have anything here formally written up that says we need to do this, is that right? So we just want to make a motion to grant the waiver as outlined and take a
Do you have
board
the
vote,
section?
and then open a public hearing, is that right?
The section that they're requesting a waiver from? Yes, that is 6.03 subsection 2 subsection C.
If that's what you,
Okay, that's what I'm looking for, right. So the grant, so we're looking for a waiver to section 6.03 subsection 2C to permit a public hearing to be held at the same meeting as the determination of completeness, where normally the public hearing would be scheduled for the following month, give the applicant, should be given, right?
Correct.
Given the applicant has sufficiently addressed staff review comments to allow for conditional approval. And I'd say that if you want to make a motion, Byron, I'd also say that you want to make a motion maybe to say, well, no, that's good. I was going to say, specific to this one, which is, it might not be the same for others coming down the pike, is what I wanted to say. But,
So amended. My motion is so amended. Second.
okay, motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
no.
How many noes? Raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4 noes.
Okay.
So 1, 2, 3 yeses, and I would vote yes, so that's a split.
Mr. Chairman, I was wondering if it would be appropriate for the applicant to address some of the criteria relative to the waiver request. I realize we jumped right into a vote there.
Not yet, because the only issue that we've got before us right now is stepping out of precedent, stepping out of the current process that staff has, which is, this is what we do, this is how we do it. And that's even before we get into the project or getting into the
Understood.
the
I was
specific
thinking
pieces.
more from the standpoint of what the applicant has done, which is somewhat out of the norm, to be prepared to ask for this to all take place in one evening.
Okay.
Would it be okay to expand on that, or?
Hang on just a
He wants to
second.
address the waiver, and we've done that in the past.
To address the waiver?
Correct. We've done that in the past. Allowed the applicant to comment on the waiver that they're, even though the public hearing hasn't been open.
Okay,
Thank you very much.
go ahead. Yep.
There's a couple things at play relative to the need for this. One is, yes, we need to get started as soon as possible. The applicant had originally come in September. We realized there was variances that were required, so it kicked us back a few months until those could be approved. The application that's before you tonight, it's obviously been deemed complete. We had a laundry list of comments that needed to be addressed, all of which, my understanding, have been addressed. Those are potential hurdles, potential concerns with trying to move forward with an application in one night, and we realize that. So we're not asking you to approve this project tonight. We're just asking for the opportunity for you to hear it, such that you would have the opportunity to approve it. Relative to some of the situations or the other components of this that we think are appropriate to allow you to do that, actually, several of the board members brought it up. Like, who are our butters? Who are the people that could be of concern with this? Being that this is not just a site plan approval for this hotel, but there are aspirations for a future restaurant as well. We've actually endeavored to connect with all of our abutters, and I mean that in a literal sense, and that there's a future interconnect driveway that would be proposed to connect into Irving and then through the Dunkin' Donuts. So we've had to go through a very meticulous process with all of our abutters to make sure that they understood the nature of what it is we were proposing. You're not going to see that on very many applications, that there is a larger project at play here. Now, in order to get this rolling, we are requesting to be able to move forward with the application, with the opportunity, just the opportunity for you to approve it tonight. If for some reason a board member or staff or otherwise says, yeah, I don't feel right about this, I don't think you're ready for this approval, you have every opportunity to say, no, we'll see you next month.
Can I,
Yes.
So I was just informed by one of my lifelines that the appeal process is actually to the Superior Court. So it is not to this board to determine whether or not to grant an appeal or to change your decision. If any abutter or a party to the application wants to appeal, they appeal to the Superior Court.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to expand a little bit relative to the request. Even I'm not sure if you would like to contribute at all relative to the nature of being able to be heard this evening. And again, it's just the opportunity for us to be heard. There's no guarantee that the board would act on the application.
Thank you. I'm sorry I'm late. I was dealing with a personal matter. We submitted this request, and Heather and I have had this debate at the Development Committee meeting because I think the process that it unfolded with respect to the development team meeting on this application was flawed. We came approximately, how many months ago? 10 months? About 10 months ago to the development team meeting, which is a great concept for the city of Concord to use, where every department head is in the room at the same time, and every issue that you could think of, you try and, it's not exhaustive, because some people, you know, got to think about it and reflect on it. You never see the plan until the developer shows up with it. But the goal of it is to make sure you put all the issues on the table so you can plan for them accordingly. One of the issues we tried to deal with on this site was where do we put the buildings? Do you put the buildings out on 3A, or do you put the buildings out on the point? Because it's one of the most visible sites coming into Concord that's being redeveloped. I had an offer from a car dealership who wanted to put another car dealership there and put a lot of cars out there. I didn't think that was a good use. We wanted to use it for a hospitality property. So our first thinking was that those buildings should be out on the highway and the parking on 3A side, particularly when you keep in mind what the view is as you head south on 3A. You have a Cumberland Farms, you have a Dunkin' Donuts, you have a truck stop, and then you have a sea of parking where there are car dealerships, some of that over the Bow line. The Concord ordinance provides that you can have, we're somewhat unique, you can have multiple principal uses, and you can't have parking in front of a principal use between that and your access, and the access is 3A. And if you look back, I was looking through the planning board records, that amendment was passed in reference to Loudon Road. Richard Uchida did some great research on that the idea was when you walk down Loudon Road where there is a lot of pedestrian traffic, you didn't want to have a sea of parking. So we thought the building should be out on the point. I think Heather was pretty firmly of the opinion they should be in a different location. People went around the room, expressed their opinion. The deputy city manager was there. He thought they should be on the point. So we left that meeting thinking, okay, the building should be on the point. And we provided plans to that effect, and we tried to submit them 3 months ago. At that point, Heather said, you can't do that, you can't submit these plans because we actually split the baby. We put the hotel, the tallest building, over towards 3A. And we put the restaurant, which isn't going to be a national franchise, out on the point. It's a lower profile building. When we went to submit the plans, we were told we couldn't because we needed a variance. Why would we need a variance? Well, we need a variance because the city was going to determine the restaurant to be a second principal use. That was the first we heard of it. We frankly think it's an accessory use. We understand that's a decision of Craig's to make, but we didn't have any indication that would occur. When we sat at that development team meeting, nobody said to us, by the way, if you decide to put the buildings out on the point, that's going to require a variance. We understand not all issues can be raised, but frankly, that one should have been. What's the net impact to that? That decision's about $100,000 cost to me. Now, in order to keep a franchise, you have lines when you have to start construction. We have to start construction in January instead of November, so we'll get to scrape the snow, then you have to thaw the ground and begin. The other consequence, just a practical financial one, is we won't be done in time for the primary season, and I hope there are going to be at least 20 Democrats running and campaigning actively in New Hampshire. Had we been told when we went to the development team meeting, by the way, this difference of opinion means that the planner gets to make the decision, and that decision, obviously, she's the planner, that decision is if you move the restaurant out there, that's a second principal use, and you're going to need a variance, we could have saved all the
I'm sorry that I
time.
have to interrupt, because the inconsistencies with my perception of events are stacking up, and I just, before the record, inappropriately.
The day I
Just
submitted,
for the record.
that's fine.
And hang on, so the issue before us isn't, we're down the road here before we get to this point. So when we were speaking before, the only issue that we're looking at is the issues being addressed in this way, but that's the only thing we're looking
Right.
at.
My point is, I think that a fair and just treatment of any developer who shows up, that determination wasn't made, we weren't alerted when we had the development team meeting that there was going to be a determination, and in fact, the day we submitted the plan, we didn't get the determination from zoning, the written determination didn't show up for 3.5 weeks. My point is this, I'm not, Heather and I have a difference of opinion, the city manager's here, he can tell you what he told, where his opinion, where these should be. We understand that everybody has a different role, but had we been alerted to the fact that if we proceeded in the way that we wanted, which was what we thought was the direction the city wanted us to go in, we would need a variance, we would have done so, and we wouldn't be asking for this waiver.
So we're trying to make up a little bit of time.
That's exactly what we're trying to do.
Yeah, yep.
So, it is not my recollection that what he is saying is not my recollection of the meeting that occurred 10 months ago.
Okay.
I don't know what or why they do or do not remember, but I don't remember the entire conversations, but I'm pretty certain that they were told at that time that they would need a variance, and it was sort of dismissed as an irrelevant fact. We were also told 10 months ago that they would return to us to have a continuing ongoing conversation about the site layout. So that's what we thought the next step in their development process was going to be. The next communication or, correspondence we received to them was their plan application 1 week before the deadline of the site plan application. At that time, it's the very first conversation that I had with Nick upon us receiving that application was, you need a variance for this. And there was a lot of disagreement about whether or not they needed a variance. They checked with code. They determined that they did need a variance. So on top of the fact that it becomes a he said, she said, which is not appropriate, it is ultimately the consultant's responsibility to evaluate and determine what variances are required for their project. We consistently tell applicants that that is their responsibility. So I take issue with being told that somehow we didn't perform up to some standard and that has cost the applicant money. That's, any single person could make that argument every time they've made a mistake. So, just for the record.
Well, just for the record, and if we need to, the deputy city manager's here, he was of the very strong opinion where we should locate the buildings. We,
Which is
perhaps
irrelevant.
imprudently,
Whether or not they need a variance.
perhaps imprudently followed that advice, because I think there was a difference of opinion. It was an important site.
So did that affect the timing as far as the, again, we're looking at the only issue that we're looking at,
Yes.
which is we should have noticed it in November, or we should have determined it complete in November and then held the public hearing in December. And that's the issue. The issue before us
Right.
is setting a precedent. I mean, we've never
Right.
done it. So we've never done it. And when presented to the board, the board's given the opportunity to look at it and say, if you want to do this, this is what they're asking. Do you set it? And the concern is what happens if you set it up and then it's a development in a really residential area and the same type of thing's going to happen. So,
Let
Can
me,
I also make-
well,
hang on just a second.
go ahead.
Go ahead.
This motion was made and it failed. So
Right, so-
now we're in a legal situation where a motion has been
Right,
made,
so
there was a
before you
tie.
came in,
and
Steve,
it-
we had
and it failed.
the question was asked to the board that we
So I'm
had,
not sure what
right. we
you're
had the-
allowed to even do after that.
We had, yeah,
I apologize for being late. I had a personal situation that prevented me from being here at the beginning of the hearing. The world will not end tomorrow if we don't get this. We'll be delayed a month. But what I think is important and what I'm trying to convey is this community would like to have more than 2 developers here. And how receptive you are to working with developers sends a signal. The development process, well before Heather came here or anybody on this staff came here, came a result of how poorly the process worked in the 80s. Some of you who are long of tooth will remember when we had our planner and our city manager debate in the newspaper about things. And I think it's generally a good process. But there are times, if it's not conducted well, that there is a consequence. It's going to be a consequence for us. I'll accept the responsibility. We should have perhaps assumed that the difference of opinion should have been filtered out more. Maybe we should have come back and polled everybody again. I still would have a differing opinion on whether we needed a variance, but we went and got it. So the world will not end tomorrow if we don't get this. It's going to cost us money, but I think it's important for the planning board to hear how the process works, and it's not as good as it should be, or it could be.
Okay.
My opinion.
Mr. Chairman, if I could just add one thing, and I realize there's a little backstory there, and we kind of got off target, but relative to the criteria for granting a waiver, we're looking at the public. Is there a detriment to the public or otherwise relative to process? Now, I realize that waiver request was posed in a certain manner. Is there the opportunity, and if the board's still thinking no, then obviously we won't move forward with it, but is there an opportunity to request that waiver in a different format such that the board would have the opportunity to vote again on it?
well, that's an interesting question. So
Because there's
again,
some very specific
got some
components
lawyers
of
on
this
the board, but
project.
we've-
And I know Steve brought up some backstory, but I think the relevance more so is in the waiver request. We have abutters who do not have an issue with our project. If anything, they are excited about it because it's going to bring more business to them. And the sooner we get it built, the better it is for everyone else. I've lived in New Hampshire, I think, for the last 15 years. I've driven by the Stays Inn on Exit 12 for some time. It's been in there since the mid-'60s. That building needs to go, and the
So
sooner the better.
I'm trying to think of how you'd be able to revise the request. Again, we have the request before us to grant the waiver. We voted on it. It didn't pass. It was a split decision. So that's kind of water under the dam. So if
I think there is.
if you, I don't know if you can go back to that. I don't know if you can come back around to that legally.
Well, I don't practice zoning law anymore, but I keep current on it. I don't think you can.
Right. I think it's,
It would be a flawed decision.
That's right.
Be subject.
So what do you need to get started from, let me ask that question. So obviously the ground issues are there. You've got your demolition permit, so you can begin the demolition, but you just need to get the dotting the i's and crossing the t's
We'll
to get
come
the
back.
project done.
We'll come back and do the hearing and do it all over again and spend the extra money.
So what do we do this meeting? Anything as far as determination of completeness?
Well, the
Is there anything the
motion,
board would like to hear?
No, the
relative to
motion
project?
the
failed.
motion, I mean, when the motion failed, it should have been the end.
The end of
of the
it.
entire thing.
You were indulgent to even let me speak after the motion. I
Well,
appreciate it.
We appreciate the comments. Well, some of us appreciate the comments. What is
Now the planner, we'll get over it.
What
We'll
is
get
anything before us that we need to address as far as determination of completeness or anything?
You're done.
So we
Right.
need to
Public
vote, we
hearing.
voted on determination of
voted for
completeness
next.
already, right?
Right.
So that's already been done, approved, so that's found the application
So
complete.
you set the public hearing for
Set the public
January.
hearing for January, and it'll be good to go.
Thank you. We
Okay.
appreciate the chance
Thank
to
you very
raise the
much.
concern.
I just want to make sure that you actually did motion that it
Yeah,
was complete.
We did, yeah, we did determine it
Yes,
complete,
we did.
and we didn't
And
open
then
the
you moved
public.
on to the waiver
Well, and we
request.
didn't open the public
Thank you.
hearing, we addressed the waiver.
Thank you.
Okay, guys, sorry for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask
Carol, yes.
a butter question?
Yeah.
I thought there was a dentist or a doctor. on
There's
the
one,
front
I
of
think
it.
there's only one abutter.
No,
There's three.
There's really, you have the dentist's office, which is.
Down to
the direct
Dunkin'
butter.
Donuts.
You have Irving that really kind of has a bit of a
On the
pork chop
corner.
lot that ties in, and we have the DOT, and I think we have a butter across the street as well, which is named.
There's three. I thought everyone was saying one a
One,
butter.
I was just thinking there was one building behind them. I wasn't thinking they had to go around it. Okay, so we'll see you next month?
Thank you.
Okay, That was item 6E, correct? So we're
Correct.
moving
So long
on.
ago, I don't remember,
I
Mr.
was going to
Chairman.
say, we're moving on to item 7A, which is ordinance amendments. If we could read those into the record?
We'll do one, I think we should do them one at a time.
7A, yep.
Proposed ordinance amendment to section 29.2-1-2B, computation of the amount of the impact fee, updating the variable unit rate for transportation, recreation facilities in accordance with the annual inflationary rate.
Where is John Regan to hear this? He just
I-
asked about this last month.
I know,
Just
so-
asked about it last month, and he's not here. Hopefully he's watching somewhere
Yeah,
on the
exactly.
beach.
Wait till he comes.
Postpone it for John.
Yeah.
Okay, so what do we got?
Do you want to do
Any,
it?
any staff recommendations?
Yes. Well, I'll let Sam summarize the report.
Sure.
I'll just state for the record, this is something that we do every year annually for Earl. We make recommendations. The board then makes the recommendation to council of whether or not what to do with the impact fees. And go ahead, take it back.
Sure, so staff would recommend to the board to determine whether or not to recommend to council to adjust the impact fees in accordance with inflationary rates based on the inflation that has occurred since the last time the fees were updated. Inflation has increased by a rate of 11.45%. For transportation construction costs and 8.78% for recreation facility construction costs. So staff would recommend that this rate be applied to the impact fees should the board vote to recommend to council to update these impact fees.
Can I jump in?
Yes.
Oh, go ahead. Teresa has a
I
question.
just have a question, is when were they updated last? 2014. That's what I thought, 2014, 15, okay.
Yes.
So, and again, I think in the report, in reading through the report, I think the thing that struck me was to the rate of inflation. If we haven't updated it in 2014, 15, 16, 17, and look at it, the rate of inflation is, 11.4% to reflect the rate of inflation for highway construction. We don't have to recommend 11% increase. I mean, if we'd say 2014, 15, and 16, we're not going to go back that and look and say a 2%, a 4%, a 5%, whatever we wanted to look at. So even though these numbers are here from the increase in the rate of inflation, it's not anything more than just that's how much they should have gone up every month, every year. Yes.
So at the last meeting, there several people were asking questions about why do we have these impact fees? What do they do? What do they contribute to? And so we went about trying to find this information for you. And we have the deputy city manager here who is going to give you a short kind of summary of what the fees have been used for in different projects. So I would, if you would like to
Can somebody
invite him
grab
up.
Carlos?
He's right there.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought I saw you leave.
You're hidden.
You were hidden behind there. That was the only reason I said that. I do, before we go any farther, I just want to ask the audience too. We've got some housekeeping items on the agenda. Are you here for anything in particular?
Just to listen to the discussion about solar.
Okay.
Solar, okay. Great, thank you. I just want to make sure we'd taken some items off the agenda. I just want to make sure you weren't here for something else. Thank you. Okay. Mr. Bahia, could you introduce yourself to the board and welcome to the table?
Sure. Good evening, Mr. Chairman, members of the planning board. So as Heather just noted, she asked me to come and talk about the impact fees, which is my regular visit to the planning board now. This seems to be the only thing I talk about, is impact fees. The history on impact fees, they date back to around the 2001 timeframe when the economy was really humming along and communities across the country were basically looking at impact fees as a way to do a couple of things. One, to regulate the growth and to control some of that growth, and also to take advantage of the growth in terms of infrastructure improvements, because the notion was that these projects were having impacts on the public infrastructure, be it each community does it a different way. In our case, it became schools, transportation, and recreation. As the board may recall, we used to assess the fees for school impact fees for Merrimack Valley School District as well as Concord School District. Those two fees have since been eliminated because the projects associated with those fees were paid off, the debt on those projects was paid off. Last year, the board supported an FPAC recommendation. The Fiscal Policy Analysis Committee was recommending that we waive the fees for non-residential construction, so your commercial, your nonprofit type construction. The board supported that, and the council also voted to affirm that. FPAC did not recommend neither the council institute any waivers last year for any residential construction, but I just want to make it clear to the public and to the board that we do have waiver provisions built in for downtown Pennacook and downtown Concord for projects that involve market rate residential in existing buildings. They would not be susceptible to a transportation impact fee. However, they would have to pay a recreational impact fee. So in terms of some history, in terms of projects and how we use the dollars from impact fees, it's important to note that you can only use impact fees for adding capacity. So you can't use it to replace an asset. You can't use it to do operational expenditures or maintenance expenditures. And with our projects, our capital projects, if you look at how they're funded, and Councilor Champlin's well aware of this, impact fees typically are just one of many funding sources. So you'll usually have impact fees. You may have capital closeout, which are savings from other projects that we've completed and we've had some money left over. We apply it to a new project. You'll also have debt financing, and you could also have donations. We're talking about, for example, the skate house that's under construction now that is being funded in part with donations. So those are how we basically try to patch together a series of dollars and funding sources to make our projects work. In terms of our large projects for transportation, just to give you an order of magnitude, so the Sewell's Falls Bridge was a $10 million project. 2% of that budget was paid through impact fees. Main Street project, $14 million more or less, about 3% through impact fees. Langley Parkway phases 1 and 2 together was about 7% paid through impact fees. Now, the way impact fees are designated in the community, they're generated in 4 quadrants. So the city's divided in fourths. And if a development happens in one of the quadrants, the impact fees generated there are to be used for capital projects in that quadrant, with the exception, though, being that if there's a capital project the city's undertaking that may have a sort of broader regional or citywide perspective, then it could take impact fees from different quadrants. So, for example, the Exit 16 roundabout, smaller project, and because of where it's located, it's basically on the border between 2 of our quadrants, and it obviously is often interchange, so it's at a more regional approach. That project, the impact fees accounted for about 20% of the total budget, so a much bigger impact there. We also collect, as I mentioned, recreational impact fees. So about $600,000, just to give you an idea, $600,000 in recreational impact fees have been allocated to the Citywide Community Center because it can pull, it's a city, obviously by its title, citywide facility, tracks from all 4 quadrants. And that represents about 8% of that total project budget. And I would imagine that if the City Council moves forward to do, for example, a turf field at Terrell Park, that would be something new in our recreational inventory, that we would apply impact fees to that as well. Today, in terms of balances, I was also asked to talk about how much money is left over now in terms of impact fees because we've made these waivers and exemptions over the last several years. We have about $392,000 in terms of transportation impact fees today and about $77,000 in recreational impact fees that we could have, in theory, apply to other projects in the future. In our capital program, I just looked at it before I came over. Over the next 10 years, we're anticipating that we'd probably spend over $300,000 in impact fees on the many projects that are outlined over the next decade. So those are the uses. When we asked the boards to consider, for example, waiving impact fees, we are cognizant that when you waive an impact fee, then what that is doing is you're putting the burden then primarily on the taxpayer to pick up the difference. The argument last year when we came to you was that the way the economy is today is not the way it was in 2000. We don't have the type of development we have. We're not building 105 new homes every year like we were back then. We're building maybe 50 homes, and actually in some years right after the recession, we were negative in terms of new home construction because we were demolishing more homes than actually building. So the council has really wanted to incentivize growth, and in doing that, one of the tools that they have at their disposal is, working with the impact fees and creating waivers to just make our community more developer-friendly. So that's a little brief history. I'm happy to take any questions you might have. And the annual adjustment, obviously, every year in the ordinance is built in that you'd recommend the adjustment. You may have a question as to why you're still thinking about adjusting fees when we've talked about all these waivers. One of the things that was important to the City Council when they looked at this last year was to ensure that the structure of the ordinance is still remains. And they didn't want to eliminate the fees. They wanted to just put a waiver provision in. So that should the council come back to this in the future, and should growth change, for example, and they want to re-implement, or reinstitute, I should say, the impact fees, they could do that. So in essence, if you still keep updating them, they would make perfect sense because then the numbers would hopefully be adjusted for inflation.
What waivers did we get rid of? We got rid of some waivers last year or the year before. Not waivers, I'm sorry, impact fees.
Sure. So we've we've eliminated the school impact fees.
Yep.
So those are both been zeroed out. So those were the ones you'd see with your residential development. So that you probably save folks anywhere between $1,200 to $2,000 or so, for each house, for example, that's built in the city. We've also provided waivers for market rate housing downtown, which I just alluded to. We waived the non-residential construction, so any commercial construction, someone wants to build, for example, a new Banks Chevrolet dealership.
Or a new hotel on
Or a
exit
new
12.
hotel, exactly. Yeah, very pertinent, exactly, in terms of being developer friendly. So, right, you want to build a new hotel on South Main Street. If there's an impact fee, if that would be susceptible to impact fees, it would be assessed now under the new.
So there's no impact fees now on commercial development at all?
That is correct.
And in residential development are only the,
Recreational and transportation
Recreational
today, with
transportation.
some exceptions, as I noted, in the downtowns.
right, and those have not increased since 2014, and before us tonight is just the new numbers for this year. Any thoughts from your perspective as far as the city side of it goes? No.
I think
No.
staff is simply recommending, like, in theory, we should probably keep up with inflation.
Yeah.
As the board knows, over the years, when the board has recommended increases, they go to the council, and the council has not every single year adopted the recommendation for different reasons, which makes sense to me. So I'm not sure where the council would fall today, but it would make sense to keep it up.
So my only reason for asking that is the way the discussion piece is mentioned here, and I want to reiterate it because I said it before, but, the transportation facility impact fee table at 11.4% to reflect the rate of inflation for highway construction costs from July of 2015 to December of 2018, and increase the recreational impact fee table by 8.7% to reflect the inflation from 14 to 18. I don't know if we want to recommend those larger number. We want to come back and recommend, a 2% or a 4% or whatever it might be. And you don't have any thoughts or any issues with that as far as the city perspective?
It's really up to the purview of the board.
Okay. Somebody had a question. Dean?
Yeah.
Yep.
Is it appropriate for this board, or for me, to ask the amount of money that's currently raised by impact fees and what the proposed percentage increase would then raise?
Well, I
'Cause
think it's-
You had a $392,000 surplus, you said?
No, I wouldn't call it a surplus. Those are just dollars that have been raised that right now have not been allocated to any project that's being
Unallocated funds,
constructed.
all right.
It's certainly appropriate to ask. I don't know if you know those numbers off the top of your head or not, but.
Well, it's very difficult to gauge what we're going to generate
Right.
because it's all dependent on the private sector constructing something, so.
So in the amendment too, Earl, there is, you see the amendment which says, single-family residential, townhouse, duplex, multifamily. It
Yep.
tells you what we're currently doing now. So every
Right.
single family is $1,093. If we changed it in the impact fee variable, we'd bump it up to $1,189. Is that the rate that we're looking at? So those 11% is not a huge number at that point or that, if that's 11 or 8%, one of the two.
So there is not a forecast?
We have, so typically we have an idea of, when we do our budget of big projects that are coming on, we have a baseline in terms of small projects that are consistent every year in terms of our building permit revenue. We have not done a traffic or any kind of impact fee projection because depending on the type of project, there could be differences. I mean, if it's an office versus something else, it's something that we've not done in the past. You could probably, I imagine if we did a trend analysis going back, we'd probably figure out sort of what the average would be. But that's not something that I have right now at my fingertips to offer you. And I did want to, when you asked me before other changes we've made, I forgot to mention one that was very important, which is the impact fees used to be assessed on residential on a square footage perspective. And so it was one of the most constant complaints we received from people. If you were doing a finished basement, for example, or you were building a small addition on your house, you were getting hit with an impact fee. So it would add like $1,000 to $2,000 to your project. And that really annoyed folks because you're saying, how am I impacting? You're definitely not the only person. What impact am I having on the infrastructure of the community by building my finished basement? So council recognized that, and we changed that. So you see on the chart that it's by dwelling unit today. So you wouldn't be susceptible to that.
So you're here tonight on this particular one, 7A and 7B, is that right? Or no, that's not, no, just 7A, I'm sorry, just 7A. So before us, we've heard from Mr. Baye. If anybody has any other questions, Carlos? No? You can stay right there if you'd like. Is it a public hearing? Is it a public hearing? No. So, do we have any thoughts from the board? Any member of the board have any comments, recommendations? Would you like to see?
I'm sorry, it is a public hearing.
It is
I was
public
just
hearing.
saying that he can stay or go or
Oh,
whatever.
you can stay.
whatever you choose.
So I can ask for anybody in the public if they'd like to address this?
Yes.
Yes, we'll ask. Nobody knows? Nope. You can stay, Carlos, if you'd like.
Whatever you like.
Okay, so we've heard testimony regarding what they're used for and how they're used currently. And again, before us is the discussion of, do we want to recommend increase? Again, we're not doing anything other than recommending to council. So before us are the two recommendations from staff, which was to reflect the rate of inflation as I've written, which would be 11, or said, which would be the increase in the transportation facility impact fee at 11.4% to reflect the rate of inflation, and the increase in the recreational facility impact fee table by 8.78%. Anybody like to make a motion to recommend to council that those two fees be increased in those two amounts? Would anybody like to make a motion to increase the fees in any specific amount? Or would anybody like to make a motion not to increase the fees in any amount? Or are we completely indifferent? Wow. So we have nobody willing to say. Yeah.
I'll just say, if people aren't speaking out strongly against doing it or for doing it, maybe
There's an
doing
indifference.
alternative numbers like 4% and 5% or something.
So,
Byron wants to
yes, Byron.
Mr. Chairman, I'm going to make a motion that we recommend to council that the impact fees remain at the current level.
Second.
Okay, that motion's been made and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? I'm going to oppose, but I'll be on the record as opposing, but I've lost. Okay, so we will recommend to council that there's no changes to the impact fees. Thank you very
everybody.
much
Have a
for
good
your help, Carlos. Thank you. Okay. That brings us to item 7B on our agenda.
Proposed ordinance amendment to the Code of Ordinances, Title IV, Zoning Code, Chapter 28, zoning ordinance pertaining to the flood hazard overlay district to change the regulatory standards for designating special flood hazard areas in the city from the Army Corps of Engineers maps to the most updated FEMA maps. Would you like to open the public hearing before I give my summary?
We will open the public hearing on this and ask staff for a summary.
So this is essentially a conversation we've had for a few years now about how floodplains, or how the floodway, the 100-year floodplain and the 500-year floodplain are designated in accordance with our code. It has been for many years now referring to the Army Corps of Engineer maps, which was as a result of a study that was done specifically for Concord in 1972. 72, correct? I think that's the right, yes, 1972. Most of the rest of the state, probably all of the rest of the state, probably most of the rest of the country uses the FEMA maps. So it's sort of been a point of the development community hasn't loved it. So we're proposing to basically change the regulatory standard from the Army Corps maps to the FEMA maps. We did also meet with the state floodplain coordinator and talked about our changes, and she made a number of other recommendations that are also folded into these proposed amendments. And she, when we told her what we were doing, she said, yeah, I always wondered why you guys had the Army Corps maps instead of FEMA maps. So we felt vindicated that even the state floodplain coordinator was not in opposition to this change. So everything that you find in there, it ended up being a fairly complicated amendment because of all the different sections that it talks about, this section in the ordinance, so all of those sections had to be listed. The only really new thing, and this is again in accordance with the recommendations of the floodplain coordinator, was the additional language about variance criteria, and that's basically language that we need in our ordinance per the federal regulations in order to qualify for federal funding for emergency relief. So she was basically helping us out, saying you need to throw this language in there because that's a requirement from FEMA. That's basically it.
So my only question in reading through this, just interesting information in this amendment. I just
Scintillating.
struggled mightily reading through the amendment, but my primary question was, why is this a zoning?
Yes.
Is this a zoning ordinance, and why is it before us to make a recommendation?
Well, it's the same way that any zoning amendment comes before you to make a recommendation to council. So
But an ordinance change like this,
Yes.
it still comes
Yep.
before us, okay?
it's no different from the public facilities impact fee ordinance or zoning
So just
change or.
dumbing it down for me a little bit. So
Mm-hmm.
if I look at one of the zoning areas that they're talking about here, the 500-year floodplain versus the 100-year U.S. Army Corps of Engineers study from 1972 versus the FEMA, in a specific area, and I saw somewhere in here where it said these specific areas, we've restricted any type of development in those areas. Say Kiwanis Buckeye, so I'm looking at it here, off Loudon Road, Associated Development, Black Hill Road. So if you had a property that you had developed and had a house on, and you wanted to subdevelop it and put a second property on it, if it was in this old plain, you couldn't do that, no matter what, right?
So each of the different, we have 3 special flood hazard areas. We have the floodway, which is very difficult to have anything at all
Yeah.
put in it. We have the the 100-year floodplain, which has, you're allowed to basically do commercial development, anything that's permitted in the underlying zoning district. There are other restrictions that may be there. You're not allowed to do residential development in the 100-year floodplain. Those are those restrictions, the
So-
100-year. And the 500 floodplain, again, has even less restrictions. You can do commercial or residential development. So each of the distinct hazard areas has specific restrictions on it. So the biggest, what you're asking, the question that you're asking is, there's a lot of land that's developed that may need to be redeveloped that was, under the Army Corps maps, considered floodway. So nothing essentially could happen on those
Right.
properties. So the FEMA maps restrict the floodway pretty much to the actual water course.
Okay.
So those areas are now considered 100-year floodplain, and now they're allowed to do anything that's permitted in the underlying zoning district, with the exception of residential development.
With exception of residential development.
Correct.
No matter- So that doesn't change at all.
So
That does change.
Well, the restrictions on the type of development you can have, so residential is not obviously permitted in the floodway.
Right.
Or the 100-year floodplain. I believe you're allowed to do residential in the 500.
500-year.
but we currently have development. in-
Yes, yes.
There's currently
They were like,
property
it
in
was
there.
like existing disturbances, or, I'm not sure,
It's
actually.
existing
I wonder-
residential.
There's existing, that was my
Yep.
question. So if there's existing residential in a 100-year floodway now,
100-year floodplain, not floodway.
flood,
And so there's very specific criteria for if those homes are damaged, how you're able, and how and when you are actually able to reconstruct them.
okay. Okay, and this ordinance will tighten those boundaries up.
Correct.
Pulls it closer to the waterways now that there's dams and whatnot, right?
Yes.
Okay, any other questions?
No, I was just going to make a motion.
You are to make a motion, okay. Let's see what we've got for a recommendation. Oh, sorry, Carol?
So is the bottom line here that the FEMA maps designate less land in floodplain or more land in floodplain than the Army Corps maps?
I'm not sure that there is a distinction or just much of a difference. I mean, that would be a pretty involved study to do. But overall, the areas that are considered within the flood plains and the floodway may be very similar. The difference is that the FEMA recognizes a much less of an area in the floodway. So that area, do you understand what I'm saying? So within a certain area, likely there's, the other thing is the Army Corps, when that was done in the 70s, we didn't have LiDAR, we didn't have advanced, technology, and it was based on 20-foot contours. So the specificity wasn't there, whereas now we have 2-foot contours and really high, high-resolution imagery that we use for it. So within a certain parameter, they're probably pretty similar in terms of the amount of area. It's just where those designations of floodway versus floodplain are. So now there's more in floodplain, less in floodway.
That was my next question, is when were these FEMA maps?
They were last
Generated.
updated, what does it say?
2010.
Thank you.
2010. So it's more
2010.
current data.
Okay.
And then also, I don't know if you mentioned, this only pertains to the Merrimack.
Correct.
So Army Corps, we only had done for the Merrimack River.
The Kentucky stays with the.
So the Kentucky stays the same. Any other flood areas stay the same. This is only, has to do with the Merrimack River.
And those FEMA maps are getting updated.
The last time I think it was updated was 1999 or 2000.
I think 2010 is the most recent.
But prior to that, it was 10 years before?
Yeah, I think they try to
it's
do it every
about a
10 years.
that's what I
Yeah, so they'll probably be updated again soon.
If I could note one other thing on the FEMA maps versus Army Corps. Army Corps hasn't, as Heather mentioned, hasn't been updated. FEMA map does get updated, and if a development or something is going where they're proposing it within the floodplain, they can obtain a copy of the model used in the FEMA study so that they can model their changes to figure out if there is any impact, adverse impact to the flood elevations. The Army Corps study, there is no available model for that, so there's no way for anybody to easily try to do that analysis.
Thank you.
Okay, so Matt, you said you wanted to make
I would
Motion?
make the motion that we recommend adopting the FEMA maps to replace the Army Corps of Engineer maps.
I'll second that.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries and moves us to the next item on our agenda. So again, items 8, 9, 10, 11, and 12 have been tabled and will be heard at a future date. And that brings us to item 13, which is Solar Ordinance Amendment Workshop. And as I said in the beginning, we're going to talk about this, but this is not a public hearing, so we're not going to be taking public testimony on this topic. So you're up, Heather.
Beth is up.
Beth is up.
Solar ordinance.
I just have to change the slide that I noticed was in the wrong location. Okay.
So you don't have this in your packet, so pay attention.
Oh,
Yeah, let's
Lisa,
hand
the
you
right
down.
next to you.
They're
Right
right
here, sorry.
This is the actual proposal.
With the
proposed
slides in the right
language.
order?
They are now.
This
Is
is
the packet in the right
this-
order?
no,
Oh, no, that's not the slide.
This
that's
is the proposed
ordinance.
amendment language. It's not the slideshow.
This- yeah.
Well, welcome to the table. We don't have to
you.
introduce you and have you swear on the Bible, so we'll recognize Beth
the
as the
calendar.
Assistant City Planner and tell us about the Solar Ordinance Amendment.
Sure. Everybody ready? Okay, so coming before you tonight, this is an ongoing process. We're trying to get as much input as we move forward. This document pretty much changes every 3 to 4 days as we discover a lot of intricate parts that feed into this. So once we change one thing, you realize the compounding effects on everything else. So you're seeing it where it stands today. So just to give you a little rundown of why we're at where we are, in July 2018, City Council adopted a commitment for renewable energy for the city and private citizens, so community-wide for 100% renewable energy for electricity by 2030, thermal energy and transportation by 2050. They recognize that solar energy is probably going to be the most prominent renewable energy that is used to meet these goals. So that led to the proposals that are coming before you tonight to update our permitting process and our ordinances to clarify the process for solar development in the city. We heard a lot of input that's not very clear right now, the way that you come into the city and develop for solar developments. So the Concord's Energy and Environment Advisory Committee, that's CEEC, who you'll see listed throughout the presentation, that group submitted a draft ordinance revisions to planning staff back in August. We've been working with them. We've had several meetings with a subsect of that group that's working on the proposal. We've had 2 public information sessions, which I believe some of you attended back in October. We discussed with the Conservation Commission last month, and now we're before you tonight as we move forward. And then one other component is the group is working on a strategic visioning action plan. They haven't figured out the title of it yet. That'll eventually be coming before you, but board staff is working on them with that. So this PowerPoint is some slides taken from the public sessions, just so you have an idea of sort of the information that we're giving out to the public, and also to get you up to speed on what we're talking about. So this is the Solar Energy 101 that the Environment Committee had given at the public sessions, the sort of the key terms that we talk about: megawatts, kilowatts, so that's the capacity of the energy that's produced by these facilities, roof mount, ground mount, you can read all those. The 1 megawatt per 5 acres of land. That's sort of a standard that we're looking at when we're looking at the size of mostly the larger developments. That's what we start to think about. And then just the different types of how, either it's for how, if you're paid, if it's for your own personal use. That's the community solar and storage and all of that as we're working through as we move forward. So under the existing ordinance, rooftop installations are currently allowed in all, for all residential and non-residential properties. We have a significant amount of installations already in the city. There's over 200 permits that have been issued. The city has a tax incentive program that was passed, I think, last year by council, that the solar installations are tax exempt if you are using that solar energy just for your own facilities.
Sorry, so 200 residential installations.
And non-residential.
And non-residential installations, and there's tax exempt in what say, so it doesn't increase the value of your home?
Right.
Okay,
So they don't.
so no incentive to put them on, it's an incentive to, that doesn't increase your taxes?
Exactly, yep.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So currently, ground-mounted solar installations in the residential districts are allowed as an accessory use, and the way that it is interpreted, since the ordinance right now does not, if you did a word search for solar, you will not find it in our current ordinance. So the way that the zoning administrator has interpreted it is it's an accessory structure. So when looking at it as a structure, it's accessory, it's for the use of that property, and it's allowed in all residential districts right now. And it's limited by what serves the property. And it must meet the current setbacks and be in the rear or the side of the house. And then for non-residential, it falls under the category of public utilities, public essential utilities. That's the category that it's currently interpreted under, and that is either by right or conditional use permit. The only places it's by right is in the performance districts. All other districts, it's conditional use permit. And they have to meet the current lot coverage and setback requirements for any structure or within the districts. So what's led us to have all these public information sessions, this was not contemplated as part of the master plan process when we went through it prior. We'll be going through the whole process again soon, so it's a little, we're trying to jump the gun here. Well, not really, but we're trying to get this information to the public and get public input since it's not within the master plan itself. Some of the things that we've had a lot of discussions about is the properties, large properties within the open space districts, the RO, and then the larger RM properties. They have the rural character is to be protected, which is what the master plan promotes renewable energy. So that supports moving forward with these changes, and the master plan supports taking steps to enhance tax base, which larger scale solar developments would help enhance. Within the energy master plan itself, it does talk about maximizing energy conservation and efficiency for the city, encouraging businesses and residents to use renewable energy. But the bottom bullet point is one of the things that is out there. Within our master plan, it specifically says less than 1 megawatt, where we're looking at larger scale developments and how do we address that now, because within the master plan itself, it's not contemplated above 1 megawatt, which is about a 5-acre development. So some of the, where we're starting with the proposed amendments, that discussions we had with clarifying the permitting process, and that's by adding these solar categories to make it more clear when a developer is coming or a resident is coming into the city and wanted to install these renewable energy installations. We'll talk about buffers and screening, requiring wildlife habitat plantings, co-location with agricultural uses, minimizing impacts to natural resources, protecting the scenic vistas, and then looking at requiring decommissioning requirements for larger projects. So what happens when these projects in 20 years, when the developer goes away, are we going to be left with all these solar panels, or the land is marred by how the installation went? So requiring that some sort of either bond or decommissioning agreement be part of any plan. And then the discussion of requiring large developments to sell that power back to the city to help the city meet those renewable energy goals that we have. And then we also have to update the site plan regulations and the stormwater regulations within that. So specific amendments that are in the ordinance that was passed out to you right now. Some cleanup items adding the solar collection systems, that's the terminology that we're going to be using, to be allowed as a principal use in all of the districts except for the OCP, CVP, and CVP. Allowed by right as an accessory use in all districts, and we've added that category to that table of uses. Revising multifamily manufactured housing parks, cluster, planned unit developments to allow residential and community solar as accessory uses. They'd be allowed under the table, but it helps to clarify within those sections that they are allowed.